All right, members, on page 4 of the matrix, the last of the items the staff's coming to on this one.
Yeah, I better ask Martha to come on up and join me on this.
Ms. Davis.
She's certainly more the expert than I. Again, this was what had once been WR R5. It's now WR3 as we reorganize things. And again, this is one of the proposals that's in the plan to address the requirements of the Delta Reform Act that all water users ought to be reducing their reliance on the Delta. And it's one of the ways to be sure that agencies are making reasonable progress and implementing the steps that are feasible to do so.
But in any event, a recommendation, non-binding, is the staff's recommendation, was last time, and it remains that, right?
That is correct.
Got it. Ms. Davis?
Very simply, in addressing this policy, the purpose of it is to address the situations where there are permits being reviewed by the State Water Resources Control Board that could result in an increase in long-term diversions from water that is in the Delta watershed, and wanting the Water Board to proactively evaluate those permits from the standpoint of what the proponents of those actions are doing to make efficient use of water supplies, reduce reliance on the Delta, and of course this is all being done in the context of protection of area of origin rights and other existing water rights. I really appreciate the comments and the work of that Ag-Urban Coalition and sitting down with us and trying to think through what was the best way to word this policy so that it worked for all the different parties. And this is the language we worked out. We feel strongly that this is actually much improved over the language that we had before, and again appreciate Ag-Urban Coalition's help in thinking this through.
And just to address a couple of details, of course, since the Water Board's decisions are regulatory actions, they would not be, as I understand the law, covered anyway. And so a recommendation is the strongest direction we could provide. And the water code sections that are cited, 85021 is the direction in the Delta Reform Act. Folks should reduce their reliance on the Delta. 85023 emphasizes the importance of the public trust and reasonable use principles and making decisions about water use. And 85031 is provisions regarding respecting water rights, including areas of origin, and recognizing the Water Board's authority in that regard.
Randy.
I think John and I have the same comment.
Yeah, I want to make sure that everybody understands that the language that we're talking about is the option 2 on the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And it's actually something we talked about at the last meeting that we were going to work with stakeholders and try and come to some agreement. That's what this language is that we were proposing to you as something that Martha spent untold hours working on. And not just Martha, but many of the stakeholders. Right. And it's really useful. I do think it's better language than we had before.
I don't understand why she's not wearing a pin that has a bunch of angels dancing on the head of it.
That's because the Ag-Urban Coalition staff have that pin.
Patrick, your thumb's in the air. Okay, Randy had a comment.
Yeah, I'm pleased with the outcome. Would it be advisable after each of those code sections to insert what you just said, water conservation, public trust? What? No? Okay.
I can't. This is Gloria.
I'm afraid to ask, isn't it? Have we fully discussed reduced reliance, what that really means, the definition, as you look at any of these policies? Have we really, or have you discussed that in your discussions with the other groups, or is there a definition someplace?
Yes, there is, and actually this is the discussion we had with you at the last council meeting where we went over the definition in detail. So I'm hoping that we've got it covered in terms of what it means.
Can you tell me what it means?
Yes, we provided a definition for reduced reliance on the delta, and we did it in the context of the WRP1 that we discussed at the last council meeting, where we're looking at two different ways to measure it at this point in time that's proposed in the Delta plan. One is just the reduction in actual absolute amount of water that you're using from the Delta, or the Delta watershed. The second is to show it a reduction in relation to as a percentage of all the different types of water that you're using. So by expanding your portfolio of water supplies and different types of water supplies, the percentage of the amount that is from the Delta watershed is a smaller percentage. Actually, if I may, Director Gray, West Basin Municipal Water District is a case in point in the way that you have presented in your urban water management plan how your agency is both doing water conservation and diversifying your portfolio of water supplies. You are probably, your agency has one of the clearest articulations of these metrics of how it works to reduce reliance on the Delta watershed.
Pat?
So this little handout, which I thought was good fact and information, has LA Water and Power, right? And they have a bar graph that goes for 2010 and then one for 2035.
What page, you're talking about page 22? 22? It's up on
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, page 22.
Yeah. And so while it doesn't say Delta, it says Metropolitan Water District.
Right.
And there's about half, maybe less.
LADWP is another example of a water agency that has done a wonderful job of looking at, they're going to be expanding their recycled water, the water efficiencies that they are implementing.
Their Mono Lake water.
Mono Lake water is one of the it's one of the arenas where they've cut back. But the point is that it's that diversification of that portfolio that makes a water agency's water supplies more resilient to any kind of impacts, but it also gives it a way of reducing the pressure on the Delta. And I like being able to address it both from the standpoint of the actual amount of reduction, and yet also recognizing that when you diversify the amount of water from different sources, that has the same effect. And then we have included in the Delta plan, based on the conversation from the last council meeting, the importance of evaluating some of the other metrics that we might want to develop over time for how to value the way in which there are changes in the way water is being managed, particularly in the upper watershed, that could contribute water quality benefits, timing benefits. We're not in a position right now to work out those metrics, but we would want to make a commitment to looking at those types of water management changes that also could help make more resilient within the watershed the use of the water supplies. So it's clearer in terms of the definitions that we are including, and a commitment to evaluation of other metrics that may be meaningful to the Delta watershed.
Thank you, Maria.
Good.
Okay, questions? All right. Anyone want to talk to? Pat, do you have any? Okay. Ms. Marcus is going to speak for Mr. Zuckerman on this issue.
I've been waiting 15 years to do that.
Wait till you hear what he wants you to say.
I actually did used to speak for him. I was the voice
okay.
of the Delta in those closed rooms when everybody was trying to roll Delta people. WRR3, item number 3, please don't change. The suggested alternative adds nothing to existing law and eviscerates your regulatory self-sufficiency role, regional self-sufficiency goal. So he doesn't like it better than what we had before.
I gather that.
Making it clear.
Okay, well, we'd like to thank him for presenting that testimony through you, Ms. Marcus. Okay, Pat, anything else? No, okay. All right, that gets us through these four sections we've got. Let's zip through the rest, and I behaved myself.
You did.
Ms. Davis.
Thank you.
Absolutely did. Absolutely did. I'll save all my comments for funny speeches later. There are in the next packet of our material and information are some maps of the legacy communities throughout the Delta. And Mr. Ray, why don't you just start with the first one, which I guess is attachment 2 to file item 8C, which is the Bethel Island map, and give us a background on that.
Yeah, as Commissioner Tolley's noted in pulling together the Delta Plan, one of the things we realized we needed to do was identify what we meant by legacy communities, because they have names. What are they? Where do they start? Where do they stop? If we're going to have policies that we can turn into regulations, we better know where they apply. And so we have been working together with local government planning agencies with great assistance really from Sacramento County, who did the lion's share of the work pulling information together from us because they have the lion's share of the legacy communities, to identify where were areas in those communities that were planned for uses, for sort of village-sized uses, where were water utilities and stuff, so we could identify where the boundaries of those communities would be. And in general, the maps we got back made a lot of sense to us, and we went, oh, okay, this is fine. You might wonder details here and there, but on the scale of the Delta, and again, if you go look at that Delta land use map that we've provided, shows the whole Delta, you realize you have to look pretty carefully to see where the legacy communities even are as little dots in that sea of green. But Bethel Island sort of jumped out at us as an exception to that rule. The islands in Contra Costa County off the shore of Oakley, it's about 3,500 acres that are all within the Contra Costa County urban limit line. And that's because the county general plan prepared a number of years ago was then in some ways locked into place by an initiative of the voters that said the county board of supervisors could not change the urban limit line. And while the intention at the time was to control development that was sprawling west across the agricultural lands between Oakley and the built-up parts of Contra Costa and San Joaquin County, one of the things that it did was it locked in place the urban limit line around Bethel Island. So Bethel Island the entire island is inside the urban limit line of the Contra Costa County general plan.
Refresh my memory, it's entirely within the secondary zone of the Delta?
It is now in the secondary zone, but my understanding, and Don, you may know better than I, that the recommendation that's been made by the subcommittee of the DPC that's been reviewing potential additions to the primary zone is recommending that Bethel Island entirely be added to the primary zone.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now the island, it's 3,500 acres, and it's got 1,300 residences on it, as well as 4 mobile home parks and 13 marinas. There's 2,100 people that live out there, either full-time or part-time. And it's one of the highest risk locations you could imagine in the Delta. Its levees do not meet HMP, which means should the levees fail, we won't get any assistance from the FEMA for fighting the floods, and folks will be ineligible for disaster assistance to recover from the damage. So there's incredible flood risk, and even evacuation is difficult. There's only a single bridge, and people who've been out there kind of recall how narrow and inadequate it is. And so it's an incredibly high-risk area for additional development.
And the locals have, is it twice now, rejected a self-assessment for levee repair and maintenance?
I know they've been unable to upgrade levees. I'm not sure of
Yeah,
the elections.
Don, is it twice now?
No, I don't.
There wasn't an election 1 or 2 years ago where they did not get the needed votes to impose an assessment.
If you look at the If you look at the map that's shown in attachment A2, you can see the county general plan for the island, and the bulk of the area that's currently partially developed is that dredge and fill kind of a marina-oriented development. It's called Delta Coves. That's a almost 500-unit development that was approved by the county back in the 1970s. The dredge and fill has occurred, but very little of the development is. It's basically unoccupied, is my understanding. But that would be an area where that development got established vested rights. It was approved before the Delta Reform Act was passed, and approved before the plan is adopted, and so it's exempt from our covered action authorities in any case. And so what we've tried to do is say, okay, if this is a legacy community and it was identified in the statute as one of the communities that would be defined as a legacy community, what do we mean by the legacy community? And so what we're trying to do is depict those areas that are already developed and are kind of in a cluster. So we have a community. It's just not an area where there happen to be homes sprawling along the levee, but we're trying to focus on, how can we identify an area where we've actually got a concentrated community. And so that's what we've tried to depict. Now, we still know we're going to need to touch base with the county in more detail. Doug Brown from the Delta Counties is going to help us sit down with Contra Costa County and make sure there's not details that we've erred in here. But what we've tried to do is make sure we're including the Delta Cove community. There's an existing mobile home park that immediately adjoins that. That's the little orange spot that's on the north side of the Delta Coves development. And the commercial facilities that are along the road that leads back over to the bridge over to Oakley. We've tried not to include within the boundaries of the legacy community the largely undeveloped areas that are planned for single-family low-density residential that are outside of that line. There are a couple of mobile home parks that are out in that area, but those are more what in a lot of counties would be thought of as kind of ag general or rural residential parcels. They're 5, 10-acre, 2-acre parcels with home sites on them. North of the line that we've identified is an existing golf course, so that's a recreational use, totally appropriate for location outside of legacy community. And then much of the red area that you see along the north shore of the island are marinas that folks use to go out and fish in the Frank's Tract and other areas. So again, our general policy on legacy communities is that about visitor serving recreation facilities is they don't need to be located in the boundaries of the legacy communities. So that's what we're trying to do here. And we think it's generally compatible with the existing Contra Costa County General Plan. After in the 90s, they revised their general plan to strengthen the controls and development in this area. So they've said that other than a single home on existing lots, that no additional development beyond what's been previously permitted can be approved without amendment of their plan.
Yeah.
And that would require, at the time that came in, folks would have to show how they could provide reasonable flood protection, effective evacuation, as well as urban services, which are also generally absent in much of this area.
So what you're suggesting here, if I understand this correctly, is that we include this map in the Delta Plan and excluding from the legacy town definition the area in white with dashed lines?
The area that's outside of that circle.
All of the rest of it is outside?
Yeah, the area that's in the white would be the boundaries of the legacy community.
All right. Okay. Randy.
And just to be clear, that's because the legislature in the Reform Act identified Bethel Island as a legacy community, or was there an official designation of this prior to that?
I don't know the status before, but there are provisions in the either the Delta Protection Commission Act or the Reform Act that identify this as one of the legacy communities. We've accepted that list. It's just how we've done our planning.
Yeah.
My recollection, Phil, you represented this area, so this is really your problem. But my recollection, Tom Torlakson was on the Board of Supervisors then, was that there was a citizen-generated initiative to do an urban limit line, and the Board of Supervisors thought it was too restrictive. So they redrew their own line, including an expansion of Discovery Bay and some other things that were somebody wanted. And then they got that on the ballot, and so the voters did approve it, but it was designed essentially by the county. And and they did it like in 1991 or something, 92 maybe. They did it, maybe 91. They did it right prior to the Delta Protection Act. And so we just incorporated their decision. And actually it was helpful because they had a very precise line.
Well, and the act that created us references Bethel Island specifically as part of the legacy towns the Delta Protection Commission is supposed to study and make recommendations on, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, I support this approach. They're probably, of all the legacy towns around, we've got Ileton as an incorporated city, we've got Rio Vista, even though it's technically not in the Delta now, they're proposing a little slug of, maybe all of it going, whatever they're going to come up with, as an incorporated city. We've got Bethel Island, which had county designation, and as you point out, the tie-in with the ballot measure. And the rest of them have been trying to figure out how to protect a legacy city community, the boundaries of which are not legally clear or established. That's been the problem. And this is the first attempt across the board on legacy towns to at least try to establish a boundary. Which is,
in this case, you have a community that's named for a larger island. So we're trying to say, hey, it's not the whole island. We think this is the legacy community that's on Bethel Island. Its name is Bethel Island as a community.
And Don, you believe that the Delta Protection Commission is going to make some recommendations?
No, we actually had a committee that worked on it and had a study came forward to the commission for review. Again, it requires legislation, and it has not been forwarded yet. But the recommendation out of the workshops was that Bethel Island be included in the primary zone. That was part of that. Again, that hasn't not been.
So you're going to convert it back to agricultural land? Is that what you're? I don't know.
We're not going to do that. But no, I think again recognizing that we had the charge to study some of the areas, including the confluence area, Kissimmee, McCollum, and the city of Ileton and the Rio Vista was discussed in the in that review and study, and so it's still pending before the commission. I think to Dan's comments, if I could, Mr. Chair, that I think it's important. It sounded like that he and Doug can be huddling with folks from Contra Costa County. I think it's really important. Certainly, both two members of the Board of Supervisors alternate on our commission, both Mary People and Karen Mitchoff, and so I think it'd be very important to certainly consult.
I don't see